Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast, produced by Zero Cliff Media. Coming to you from the US Bank Tower, high above downtown Los Angeles. In our podcast, we drill deep into forensics and criminal investigation from the viewpoint of the defense, as well as explore the intersection of the media and the justice system.
Hello, I'm Dion Mitchell here with my co-host and DNA expert, Mehul Anjaria. On this episode of Crime Redefined, we're taking you inside the Los Angeles-based chapter of the Innocence Network. The Loyola Project for the Innocent is located inside the Loyola Law School in Los Angeles. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Legal Director Paula Mitchell and Program Director Adam Grant.
What exactly is the Innocence Network? I'm going to go ahead and just read the description right off of the website. So it's 68 organizations from around the world working to exonerate unjustly convicted men and women, including independent nonprofits, as well as organizations affiliated with law schools or other educational institutions, units of public defender offices, and pro bono sections of law firms.
You know, one of the first things I learned about this organization, Mehul, is that they're international. And I thought it was really amazing to find that they had innocence networks all around the world. And I'll reel off a couple of examples. Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, Israel, and Italy all have innocence projects. I thought that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. It has really, really spread and caught fire. And, you know, of course, it all started on American soil back in 1992 in New York with the Innocence Project. And you probably first heard of its co-founders, Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld.
Oh, yeah.
When they were members of the O.J. Simpson's Dream Team during that thing they called the Trial of the Century back in 1995. And so if you go back to the origin of the Innocence Network, in 1992, DNA testing was really in its infancy. And if you think in terms of public exposure of DNA, it was really the OJ trial that was the watershed event that put it on everybody's radar. Well, of course, DNA is a powerful tool to establish innocence, but the Innocence Network also takes on non-DNA cases, which of course make up a vast majority of the cases where there's a wrongful conviction.
You know, it's interesting. At Loyola, the students are the driving force behind the success of this program. Here in Los Angeles, it seems that every few months we're hearing about another wrongfully convicted person being released with the help of the Loyola Project for the Innocent, or LPI for short. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that in 2017, they had 3 in 1 month. Is that correct?
That's right. There may have been more in that year, but they were one after another. I mean, you would just see, before I knew who Adam was, I would, see in the news, I'm like, oh, there's that guy with the bow tie again.
Once we hear from them, people have a better appreciation for that number.
Right.
Yeah, because of the amount of time and legwork that goes into, undoing one of these wrongful convictions.
This is true.
So with that, let's hear from Paula and Adam. Hi, Paula and Adam. Thank you so much for joining us on Crime Redefined today. We're really looking forward to learning more about you and your amazing team at LPI.
Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Paula, you're the legal director of the project. What exactly is your role and your duties?
Well, we have a clinic, a clinic at Loyola Law School, so students can sign up, take the seminar class where we learn about the causes of wrongful conviction, and they also help us work on the cases that come to us. People write to us asking for help, and we get those requests and review them and then investigate them and, try to see if cases are worth looking into and try to help where we can. I wear so many hats, frankly. It would take a while to go through them all, but basically, what we have found is that these wrongful conviction cases are incredible teaching tools. And it's like the perfect way to explain to, young, not even just young, anybody in law school, anybody who wants to learn about where the problems are in the criminal justice system can do that by looking at an actual case involving a real person. And so, that's the thrust.
Well, Adam, same question for you. As the program director, what's your role and what kind of duties do you have?
When we started, I was one of the two people who started this clinic. Lori Levinson and I started it when I had just graduated from law school, and we had been working on an innocence case together while I was in school that became the first case in the clinic when we started the clinic. And so when we began the clinic, and when Paula came aboard, there was nobody else there, so we did everything. Excuse me. Now that we have some staff attorneys, our roles are, I mean, it's a little hard to define what our role is. But, we all work on the cases. We all supervise students. We all take part of the teaching. Paula and I both do a lot of the sort of directorial tasks that have to do with dealing with the school and dealing with people who want things from us and people who contact us from outside. And some of the things I used to do sort of as case manager and things like that have been delegated to other people. And I try to work on as many cases as I can. And essentially, my favorite part is investigation. So I try to do as much investigating as I possibly can also.
So at present, how many staff members does LPI have?
I think there are about 7 people working together now.
Paula, you mentioned just a minute ago you have that you kind of are a little bit of the gatekeeper and kind of vet the cases that come in. I'm curious, how many inquiries do you receive every year from inmates who claim to be innocent? And then from those, how many cases do you actually take on?
Great question. We get between 800 and 1,000 letters a year from people who are incarcerated. Some of them we know right away we cannot help because they are not in custody in the state of California. So that is one of the main criteria. You have to be close enough that we can actually get to you and get to your witnesses and do the investigating, like Adam said. And then, because there are the line is so long, we try very hard to take the cases and review them as they come in. So the older the case, the closer it is to the top of the list. However, there are situations that come up where, for example, somebody comes in and says, oh, my son is in prison and he just got this declaration from the main witness who testified against him at trial. And this witness is saying, I lied, I made up the whole thing, or somebody pressured me. It's not true. He didn't do it. And when that happens, we kind of have to move the case up because it sort of starts the clock ticking in terms of how long we have to bring this claim that the person is innocent to the court's attention. So you can't take a fresh piece of new evidence like that and just stick it in the file drawer and let it sit there for 5 years while you keep working on your cases that are, ahead of it. So it's, we try very hard to be systematic and take the cases as they come. But like I said, there are different ways to get to the front of the line.
That's a great way to frame it and actually answers the question. So now it sounds like probably a better way I should have asked that is, how many cases are you juggling at one particular time? Because it sounds like you can, like you said, if something comes in, it starts the clock ticking on another case that maybe you weren't working on at that time. So if you were to put a ballpark number on it, how many in a given month do you think that you and your team are juggling?
Well, we currently have, oh my gosh, I'm going to say like 6 or 7 cases in litigation. Some of them have been filed recently. Some of them have been filed several years ago. Sometimes these cases can go on for years. So in terms of actually, going to court and we're in the thick of it, I'd say 6 or 7 cases like that. And then we have another, I would say 6 or 7 cases that we're very close to being ready to file the petition on to get that case, to get those cases into court. But we have to, we have limited resources. We're a nonprofit, so we can't overcommit ourselves. We have to make sure that once we are ready to file, we have all the resources we need to see that case through, and that can be considerable.
That's still a big
resources.
Number that you just mentioned, though, when you put those all together in any given 30 days.
Exactly, and then I'd say we probably have another 30 cases that are under investigation. at some stage. Does that sound right, Adam,
Yeah.
to you?
Yeah. There, like any good lawyer, we can't give you a straight answer on anything.
I was going to keep digging, but I thought I'd cut it off there. But actually, that's a great segue. Since you started in 2011, about how many students have completed your clinic?
I would say we've had between 150 and 200 students. And, there are also, those are law students, and then we also have a robust summer program where we work with a lot of law students from other schools and also undergrads from around the country. And so that's probably another, 60 or 80 students as well.
And those are just ones that'll come in like during the summertime. They're not full time.
Yeah. Well, what's great about the summer is that they are full time over the summer. So when we're working with students during their school year, we have to compete with 4 or 5 other very important draws on their time and attention. But as sort of the opposite of the way the rest of the world works, where everybody tries to take it easy over the summer, we usually go full throttle over the summer because that's our opportunity to get full-time help from our students. And so we have a little hive of energy and activity going on in the summer or early.
I was curious to know, how often do students maybe start the clinic and just drop out and decide it's just not for them? And if that does happen, what are the typical reasons?
Well, we will often have one student who decides that it's not for them, kind of roughly at orientation. The thing about wrongful convictions is that I think most people are very aware of wrongful convictions and innocent people in prison now, but the way they come to it is that they see somebody collapsing into the arms of their family getting out of prison, and it's a very joyous occasion. And maybe everybody doesn't think about the fact that this started with a murder or a sex crime or a kidnapping, and there's a straight up criminal victim of a crime, and a horrible story that's occurred and horrible facts attached to it. And then there's a whole other set of victims who are the wrongfully convicted person and his or her family. And there's so much suffering and so much just awful facts and awful things that you kind of have to live in as you do the case, that I think sometimes people want to come on board because they see the joy and they see the back end or the front end or whatever it is, but they don't see, they may not be prepared for what they're really going to see when you peel back the lid on these cases.
I'm curious, Adam, to kind of build on that. Do your students ever circle back in their career to help out LPI with cases or in fundraising or even promotion?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of times when we ask our students to help us with promotion or something that we're doing, but there are a lot of times when students will email us from a job at a big law firm and say, I'm finally able to do some pro bono work. Is there something I can do with you? And we also have, a lot of former students who are working for public defenders or other justice-oriented organizations who are sort of doing our work in another setting. There are also a lot of people who, generally people do our work or our clinic in their 2L year, but there's always a percentage of them who really don't want to let their case go after a year and want to come back for their 3L year and even try to get some kind of a fellowship for after they graduate. So we don't require that people want to go into criminal law when they join the clinic, but we find that we do have a lot of converts and a lot of people who went to law school to try to help people or specifically to work on innocence cases.
That's a great point. It would be hard to give a year of your life working on this and then just to walk away because your time's up. I could see a lot of the students wanting to come back, continue to be involved, as much as they possibly can to see it across the finish line.
Yes, because the cases take much longer than they're going to be in the clinic. But I also tell them, I apologize in advance for ruining you for every other legal job, because this is the most interesting, most moving, most, fulfilling thing you're probably ever going to do.
So for the students that are then turned on by criminal law and pursue it, what percentage of those students end up working for the good guys, that is, as criminal defense attorneys?
I mean, overall, I think it's not a majority, but I would say there's a good maybe 30% of the students end up working in criminal defense in one way or another, beyond doing pro bono work and things like that.
I would just add that, even those who don't go on to do criminal defense work are often profoundly moved by the experience. And I just got an email yesterday from Brittany Whitehead, who was a volunteer with us in 2015. And she was here as an undergrad from Colorado. She was going to college in Colorado, and she came to volunteer with us. And she wrote me this really nice email. And she said, I worked on Jane Dorotich's case, which is one of our cases, and it's still going on. But she has been released from prison, and her conviction has been overturned. And Brittany just said, I have a reminder in my calendar to check every week to see if there's any news on the case. And she was ecstatic to hear some of the things that she was working on 5 years ago still matter, and they helped us get Jane out. So our client Jane Dorotich out. So I was really happy that she reached out and said that, because you never know, when somebody comes and volunteers and then moves on, you don't always know what impact the experience had for them. And she just expressed it so well. I was happy.
So Paula, to build on that, for the students that do go on to be prosecutors, what do you hope that will take with them after their experience in the clinic?
I hope that they have a clear-eyed view of the fact that we all make mistakes, and a lot of mistakes are inadvertent, but they're still mistakes. And it is incredibly important that we hold ourselves accountable and for reviewing possible mistakes, uncovering them, and then fixing them. And it's not an indictment of one's character to admit that you made a mistake. It's a testament to your character that you can acknowledge that and try to fix it, and learn from it and move forward. And I also hope that they take into their position as a prosecutor an understanding that there's a lot of gray in criminal law. Things are not always as black and white as they are sometimes presented to the jury. And what I mean by that, as an example, is, just because the law says you can throw the book at somebody and charge them with 14 different crimes and gun enhancements and gang enhancements, you can just load it up. It doesn't mean that you should. And, prosecutors too can look at the whole picture. Who is this kid? Where is he coming from? How did he end up in this situation? Is this all of those questions that go both to public safety and to our humanity in how we treat people in the criminal justice system and out, I think are things that they need to, take with them when they leave our project.
Let's stay with the students, and I'm going to open this up to either one of you to answer. Tell us about the selection process for students and what goes into that. What's some of the qualities that you're looking for, and then how do you coach them up?
Well, for a start, we are looking for people who can get things done, who sort of have a history of taking care of business, frankly, not necessarily just in justice, but did things in high school where they had to sort of take charge and accomplish something and get something completed. We'd love to see people who have a history of trying to help other people and trying to make justice happen wherever they can. But we also recognize that not everybody has launched all kinds of justice projects by the time they're in law school. But the idea that we're looking for people who don't wait for somebody else to tell them exactly how to do things, for people who don't wait for other people to do things for them. And I like to look at how they talk about the work that they assume they're going to be doing, because everybody has a decent idea of what we do as an Innocence Project, maybe not the nitty gritty, but what our cases are going to be about. I like to see how people talk about that work and how, whether they talk about the effect it's going to have on the clients or whether they talk about the effect that it's going to have on them.
Well, I know that the clinic is very hands-on for the students. So besides, helping out with legal motions and proposed court orders and this kind of thing, what type of boots on the ground investigation and, kind of real lawyering experience do the students actually get?
Well, one area that comes up quite a bit in our cases has to do with expert witnesses, because a lot of these cases involve forensics or, as you know, DNA, issues for which we really do need expertise. And I like to give the students opportunities to interact with the experts. A big part of lawyering, especially litigation, any kind of litigation, frankly, is the ability to quickly become a little mini expert yourself, because you cannot interact with your own experts. You cannot appropriately address the issues in your own case unless you understand them. And that means science or, brain injury or DNA or whatever. And so I like giving the students chances to interact with the experts, help them get the materials they need to review, explain to the students, what's going to be helpful to the court. We need to get these experts to tell the court the information that the court needs to decide the issue. And it's a really great exercise. And it's a great way to teach them how to do that analysis. They also do a lot of witness interviews. We actually go out, we knock on doors, and Adam is really good at this. They come to the door and we ask if we can talk to them about something that happened 35 years ago. And the students are there. We prepare them ahead of time. They understand, the reason we're going to see a particular witness. And I think it's really a beautiful thing to watch, because in the beginning, they're usually pretty shy for the most part. They don't want to speak up too much. But by the end of even the first semester, they're finding their comfort zone and getting in there and adding value to those witness interviews. Don't you think, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. And the witness interviews are one of the more fascinating aspects, because there's a whole lot of psychology and there's a whole lot of just understanding people and how people operate and using that to try to get to the truth of the matter. And for a lot of law students, there's an opportunity to talk to someone in a part of the city or in a situation that they really don't spend much time in, and learn how to talk to different kinds of people and people in different situations, and understand that people have different lives, and you have to go into interactions with people, just not assuming that you know everything about them, or not assuming that you know what you will find when you talk to them. So it's great. It's also great practice for any kind of legal area that they'll work in. But it's such an exercise in understanding humans and trying to really have an honest interaction with a person that you probably never meet otherwise.
Yeah, I find this part of the work that you do extremely fascinating. I don't think that a lot of people that may have heard the Innocence Project understand that these students are going out into the field. And I find this a really interesting part of your work. And I was curious, since you probably have, you said students coming from across the country to come out and work, and I'm sure that there's things where they're maybe going into South Central. Has there been situations where students felt unsafe or at least extremely scared while conducting an investigation or doing these interviews?
There are things that, well, first of all, we take a lot of precautions to make sure that everybody is safe. Nobody ever goes anywhere alone. They don't go out without somebody on the staff even. And we have a lot of experience as to, how to keep ourselves safe. I think when people have become frightened, it's not even about really dealing with people. It's more like making sure whether there's a dog in the yard, or when you see a dog in the yard, whether you can go in that yard or not, or figure out a creative way to keep yourself safe and stay away from that dog. Or some circumstances where you go into a building looking for a witness, and it's a very intricate series of hallways, and it's dark, and you wonder if you're really safe in there. We take a lot of precautions, and we have a lot of faith that we have truth and justice on our side, and we don't think anything's going to happen to us if we're smart about it.
Also, one of the things that we do in every case is, I would say maybe there is an exception or two, is we go physically to where the crime occurred if we can. And, training people who are potentially considering being a prosecutor or a criminal defense attorney to actually go and lay eyes on a scene is really important. And I don't know that a lot of that happens a lot in during the trial, pre-trial and trial phases of a lot of cases. And for example, if you have a witness who says, "Oh, I saw the defendant go across the street and do X, Y, and Z, and it was, midnight, and it was on such and such a corner." And we go there at night at that same time. Sometimes we even go on the very day, or we look at the moon conditions, we look at the lighting, we go and we see, could they even really see this? And I think the students are often surprised when they see the results. Like, just physically going and putting yourself there can be incredibly informative.
Well, Adam, you hit on this already, but obviously this type of work is grueling. It can be extremely frustrating, and at times actually disturbing for the reasons that you pointed out, Adam, and also just the sort of pictures and things that you see in Discovery. So I'm curious, for what I'll call a kid, since I'm old now, a student who may be in their 20s, who doesn't have a lot of worldliness, and they're thrown into this work. What kind of resources are you able to provide them to help them cope with the stress?
Well, we do have the ability to obtain the services of a specialist for secondary trauma if people feel like they've been really traumatized by things that they've seen or things that they've heard. And we spend a lot of time talking about, after we go somewhere, after we see something, we spend a lot of time talking about what we've seen and what its effect is on us. And I have to say, the students have, once the students really give over emotionally to their case, I don't see a lot of students who seem traumatized or who seem to be thinking about themselves very much. I think almost all of them that I can think of have really taken it in stride. And again, I think the ones who are easily traumatized by some of this work kind of weed themselves out early. But we do make sure that there are counselors available if somebody needs one. And we talk a lot about how we feel about things and what we've seen. It is a constant worry, though, because they are young people, and some of them have never had a job before even. And they're looking at, we see autopsy photos and pieces of evidence with blood on them and all kinds of grim things. And by the way, we also go to prisons all the time and talk to people. We talk to some witnesses who unfortunately really have no future at all to look forward to. And we all have to figure out how to talk to a person who essentially has nothing to look forward to. How do you really communicate with them and make them feel heard without reminding them of all the things that they're missing? And that's somewhat, I don't know if traumatic is the right word, but it's pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, that could really, weigh on you when you're trying to make a connection with somebody. I could completely identify with that. You mentioned this early on in our conversation, Paula, about some of the people make mistakes, and I was wondering some of the what's the most egregious instance of injustice that you've seen in one of your cases?
I would say it's probably in Andrew Wilson's case. Uh, Mr. Wilson his conviction was overturned in 2017 after he was in prison for 32 years. And, to the DA's credit, the deputy DAs on the case at the time discovered that the trial prosecutor knew some information before Mr. Wilson's trial even occurred. And the information that she knew strongly pointed to another suspect. And that was not disclosed to the defense. It wasn't raised at trial. She went forward with the trial, and he was convicted and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And the trial prosecutor, it may be that she really didn't know the value of the information she had. Generally, I don't think prosecutors set out to convict innocent people. But it was a huge injustice. And it was clear, when we saw it, how incredibly exculpatory the evidence was, and that it clearly should have been given over to the defense. And they acknowledged that, and they conceded that his conviction should be overturned. I don't know, Adam, am I forgetting anything?
Well, also, I would add to that prosecutor not only did that prosecutor not turn over the information, but there was no effort made to investigate it either, to make sure, that it wasn't important or was important.
And what's interesting too is Adam and I contacted her all these, decades later. She's like, yeah, sure, come on over, I'll talk to you. And we told her what case it was, and she said, oh, this case has always troubled me. And she listened to, all the problems in the case, and she signed a declaration that said, I think there might be some problems in this case. And she didn't remember, the material that I was just describing. She didn't remember that happening, but there was something about the case that always bothered her. And she came forward and said so, which was really helpful. And it was also the right thing to do.
How do you stay calm? I mean, how do you see it the first time and then go back and talk to her again? How do you stay calm? I feel like I don't know.
Well, I think there's this particular lawyer skill that you have to have in the moment when something you're hearing, somebody who's sitting 2 feet away from you is telling you something that's like an earthquake.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out how to keep your poker face on and not let them know how important it is what they're saying, so they keep talking. It's a particular legal skill. I don't know what to call it.
Clearly, I would not be good at it.
If you ask a lot of people on my staff, they would tell you I do not stay calm.
Thanks for making me feel better, Paula.
So, Paula and Adam, big picture, in all the cases that you've handled in the project, if you had to rank the top 3 causes for wrongful convictions, what would you say they would be?
Well, in our office, the number one cause seems to be prosecutorial and related police misconduct, I would say. Would you, Paula?
I would say that's present in almost every case. I would say eyewitness ID and is probably second.
Mm-hmm. And of course, those aren't mutually exclusive.
Right.
And there are, increasingly we're seeing cases where it's about bad science.
And bad defense lawyering, it's the same on both sides. There are prosecutors, some are trained better than others, some are just better than others. And the same is true on the defense side. And, everybody has their resource limitations and they have their own issues, but we have seen some really horrendous cases, including an attorney who had just graduated from law school 2 years and 10 months before taking on a potential death penalty case.
Oh my.
Never, yeah, had never really had much felony experience. And yep, that was back in 1980. I think things are maybe better now.
I hope so. Let's maybe move on to something more positive. Tell us, if you want to name names, tell us a couple of, if you don't mind sharing a couple of stories on some past students who went on to do some really great things in their career.
Well, one of our first fellows, her name is Jackie Rembus, and she was in the clinic. She worked on which case, Adam? Was it Cash?
I think she came along just after Cash's case. Well, to be honest, she worked on very hard on a couple of cases that we ended up closing. That I don't know that we need to say the names of. She spent an awful lot of time working on a couple of cases that didn't pan out for the person who was convicted.
She worked on Maria Mendez, and now she works at the LA County Public Defender's Office. And we have another staff attorney named Seth Hancock, and he also now works at the LA County Public Defender's Office. We have a former student, Charlie Nelson Keever, who is now pursuing post-conviction opportunities. And I'm trying to think of, we have a couple of students who have now become fellows within our clinic. So they claim they're never leaving. So we have to try to make that happen. And
there's Lauren Noriega, who has her own practice and does a lot of post-conviction work also.
Ariana Price has moved to Tucson. She left us and moved to Tucson, got married and had a baby. And she's also doing post-conviction work.
Well, that's great. And along those lines, I'm kind of curious to know what kind of bond do you and the students end up forming with your exonerees and their families as a result of sharing such a profound experience?
It's pretty profound bond. You're right. We are in many instances a member of the family, and we have, friends / former clients who just straight up call us brother and sister. And, when you think about it, they see us as instrumental in really helping to save their lives in some respects. And, when you were asking earlier about the students and how we go about protecting them from things that might be traumatic, we give them a heads up, and like, these are autopsy photos. Don't look if you don't want to look. We try to prepare them as much as possible. But one of the things we tell them is, look, the people who are writing to us, they don't have anywhere else to go. They don't have, it's not like, should we choose Loyola or should we just go hire a lawyer? They don't have money. And so, I encourage the students, if they ever feel like, I just don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if this is going to be too hard. I want them to really dig deep and think, if I don't help this person, or if we don't help these people, there isn't anybody else. So, with respect to our former exonerees, our clients who have been exonerated, it's always a joyful thing to stay in touch, to hear how they're doing. And it is forever. They will forever be part of our extended family.
The other thing about our clients is that, when you're in prison, when you're imprisoned in America, in state prison or in county jail, there's this process of dehumanization that goes on. And when you've been in prison for 30 years or 20 years, you've been dehumanized, sometimes on purpose, sometimes inadvertently in certain situations. You've had most of or somebody has tried to take most of your humanity. And one of the ways that manifests itself is that nobody listens to you. And, if you imagine yourself having been a victim of this terrible injustice and put in a cage for all this time, and then every time you try to tell somebody about it, they just kind of shake their head like, yeah, I heard somebody else say that once, it's so profound. And one of the things that we try to do for everybody who asks for our help, even the people that we can't help, is just to try to give them an experience of being treated like a person again, and being listened to again, and being taken seriously again, and treated like somebody who might be telling the truth or has something to say. And so if you start from there and you build a relationship where you then go on to help them in this profound way, I mean, the attachment, the fulfillment that it gives us, and the effect that it has on them, it just can't help but create this incredibly intense relationship and friendship and kinship. And when you combine that with the fact that, to get to this stage, our clients are some of the most strong-willed, resilient, remarkable people that we've ever met. It really creates this bond that, it's one of the privileges of this work. You've never had a relationship like it, probably. And if the students get a little taste of it, it's another one of the really intoxicating things that we hope will help them remember the power and the privilege that they have to help other people. It's really an incredible relationship.
Yeah, I could understand now how that connection could last forever. That there's
Yeah.
just, you're giving them a piece of themselves back.
And their mom and their sister, and
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
who they may have never seen outside of prison before. It's unbelievable. It couldn't be more intense.
I want to talk about how DNA is how it's a powerful tool to potentially win someone's freedom. Tell us a little bit about the post-conviction DNA testing grant that you received and was actually just renewed.
The grant is for public institutions only, and Loyola is a private law school. So we decided what we needed to do is get creative and figure out some way to propose a project that would have us collaborating with a public institution. And so Cal State LA, which is where the crime lab that services LAPD, LA Sheriff's Department, and they have a criminalistics program and a graduate program. The director of that program, Dr. Kathy Roberts, and I got together, and thank you to Mehul, who introduced us. She could help train her students who want to go into criminalistics and be criminalists one day, the same way we're training our law students, which is, by looking at some of these cases where we think there might be problems. And so we got the grant, and we coordinate our casework where we think that there might be evidence that can be DNA tested, and we are doing it in connection with her program. So it's been incredibly successful, I think, which may be partly why we got renewed. And we've got a couple of cases where DNA is being analyzed right now, right this very minute. And we have a DNA expert retained who advises us and gives us his opinion. You might have heard of him.
What was his name again?
His name is Mehul Anjaria, and he's wonderful. And he teaches our students. He comes into our class and he's like, "We're going to learn about DNA," and it's incredibly helpful because one of the things that people always joke about lawyers is they're terrible at math and they're terrible at science, but doing this kind of work, you can't afford to be bad at science. You have to learn. And so through the DNA grant, we have funding to actually physically pay an independent lab to go analyze the evidence and look for DNA. And we have funding to do some investigation and to do some travel and things like that. So those funds are dedicated to cases where we suspect DNA might be present that could help exonerate one of our clients. And does that answer
Yes.
the question? Okay.
So speaking of DNA, obviously the origin of the whole Innocence Project was Barry Scheck, Peter Neufeld in New York. I'm curious, how much interaction do you have with that mothership Innocence Project in New York?
We actually have a really organized network. There are between 60 and 70, I think now, innocence projects across the country. Actually, internationally, there are a couple outside of the United States now too. And we all get together once a year at an annual meeting in different cities across the country. Barry and Peter are very much stewards of this work still. And, what we have learned by studying these wrongful conviction cases is incredible. And it is guiding all sorts of reforms that need to take place across the country because, what we all know, no one better than Peter and Barry is, getting people out one at a time is, it takes forever. It's a tremendous amount of work, and it's really not going to move the needle in terms of making things better going forward. What we need to do, in addition to working on those cases, is we need to look at the systemic problems that are revealed in these cases, and we need to talk about legislative reforms, changing the way we police, changing the way we punish, and think about public safety through a different lens, all the stuff that you've been hearing about in terms of the idea of criminal justice reform. And the information that we've gotten by studying these cases, it did all start with Barry and Peter and the DNA cases that they did, because what DNA did is it showed conclusively you got the wrong person. And then what we did after that is we studied it and why did we get the wrong person? And that's where we came up with all the, what we now call the common causes of wrongful conviction: a coerced false confession, erroneous eyewitness ID, police or official misconduct, all of those things. Now we know how we can go and try to address it and fix it. So to answer your question, they're very much still involved. And we do have contact with the mothership in New York, as well as our friends and colleagues across the country at other projects. Constantly a new issue comes up that nobody's ever heard of. And so we all say, hey, does anybody have seen this before? And we try to support each other that way.
People think of lawyers as very competitive, but everybody in the network really wants to see everybody else exonerate as many people as they can. And everybody's very generous with their time and their brainstorming and their advice and their ideas. Whether it's New York or some of the other projects around the country, we've had a lot of great success just helping each other and helping each other to succeed, because we're all really, we're doing the same thing. It's very specialized. There are very few people around the country who have the same conversations we have, but we are all very, very collaborative.
I want to talk about another important element of your wrongfully convicted, and that's the media coverage. Obviously we know how important these days social media about framing these cases. How can you potentially use it to your advantage of getting out in front on framing the messaging in these cases?
Well, it's so interesting to me that there are so many now days when you'll see the news or see some feed that you have, and there will be a story about somebody walking out of prison who was wrongfully convicted and who was innocent. It's no mystery anymore that these things happen, and they happen more and more, which means that these wrongful convictions are still happening. So, as a threshold, it helps just for the entire nation to now be educated on what really happens and in wrongful convictions, and the fact that there are wrongful convictions. I do think now we need to try to figure out a way for people to really pay attention to the frank facts of how it happens, why it happens, and why it may not be happening any less than it ever was, and how we need to actually take measures to change things so that, it's not just something awful that used to happen. It's happening today. Innocent people are being convicted today. And it's helpful that we're talking about justice reform in the media. But I think we really need to start concentrating not only on the success stories, but on, unfortunately, the real nuts and bolts of why this is happening and how we can stop it.
Also, just to address your question, maybe from a different angle, because people are becoming more engaged, whether it's because they're watching things in the media or because they are watching social media. We have seen sort of an uptick in projects and supporters taking a case right to the streets, right? So they'll put it up on social media. We want you to help Mr. So-and-so. He's wrongfully convicted, or let's write to the governor, and trying to mobilize support like that to bring this case to the, to get it more attention. And it's a good strategy. It's something we talk about internally a lot. It's always difficult when things are in a litigation posture because you have to be careful about everything. You don't want to do anything that might compromise your case. Right. Or so that's a needle we're trying to thread and think about, and be creative with, because people they seem to be kind of hungry for it. They want to be engaged. We've gotten so many requests in the last year. Let us help. How can we help? I want to volunteer. Can I donate? And I think a lot of it's because of what's going on politically and culturally across the country, and in Los Angeles. And we want to be able to respond to that. We want to give people opportunities to engage and to help and to feel like they are part of the solution. So if you guys have any ideas.
That's what we're here for. We've actually had a number of people reach out to us and want to bring exposure to their particular case or someone else's case. So yeah, and I think we have a couple of ideas that we can talk about.
Great.
Well, Paula, besides grant funding, what are the other sources of your funding for the program, and how can people help you out?
We rely almost entirely on grants and donations, and we have been developing some really good community relations, working on community outreach, and taking our case out there to people who are looking for ways to help. Donations are huge. We have events, both events that we charge for and raise money with, and events that we don't. But really, what we need is money. We need more attorneys. As you heard me describe earlier, the caseload that we have, the number of people who are waiting. We need help with social media. We need help with our website. We need help, getting the word out to people that we are here and we can help if we have the resources. What else do we need?
Well, that is, I mean, it sounds awful to say, but just raising money to pay attorneys is a huge part of the ball game. Having people who, as you just asked about the media, having people who can help us raise our profile would be helpful, because it would again point us toward funders and people who want to give us that kind of help. It's hard for people. People always want to help us, but these cases help us in kind, or to actually do tasks or come into the office and do help. But it's a very hard place, I think, to help in short bursts. The kind of help that we need from people often involves a real time commitment, because these cases take so long and these matters are so complicated. So, we love having people volunteer with us, and we try to be creative about different ways they can help. We have a high school student, for instance, who started an Innocence Project club at her high school and just sort of raised awareness at her high school among the other students who didn't know all the things that she knew about wrongful convictions. There's all kinds of creative ways to do it. People can, who are involved. We've spoken, for instance, at meetings of organizations that are sort of continuing organizations, education organizations for older people and retirees who just want to learn more things. We've spoken to those groups, and they can branch out and help us in various ways if they're engaged. So there are a million ways to do it.
What do you see in the future for the LPI?
Well, in the near future, we are planning to announce that we are changing our name to the Los Angeles Innocence Project, so that it will help people find us. There are a number of other institutions of higher learning in the country called Loyola. So we've had people comment that, it's a little bit difficult. Are you in New Orleans? Are you in Chicago? Where are you? So we're going to be Los Angeles Innocence Project. So hopefully that will help.
The simple branding, I think, will probably clear some things up.
Yeah. And so that's on the horizon. We have some cases that we are, up to our eyeballs and litigating. So hopefully we're going to be getting a few more clients exonerated, and that's about it. I mean, we're holding it together during COVID. It's as you can tell from this conversation, the nature of this work is extremely collaborative, and it's been really hard. I mean, I know it's hard for everybody to be apart and isolated, but the way we work and the way we have to investigate our cases and get out and knock on doors, it's been challenging this year, but we have really weathered it. And, we've had 4 people released from custody this year, which is incredible.
Under these circumstances, that's amazing.
Yeah. So,
just to return to your previous question about how people can help too. One thing we haven't talked about in this conversation is the aftercare that goes on when our clients are exonerated and released from prison. In a lot of cases, they walk out of prison with absolutely nothing, no belongings, sometimes no family, no housing, no jobs, very little job training, no money, obviously. Literally sometimes no belongings at all. And they are not entitled to anything automatically when they get out of prison, as opposed to even parolees who have, there are programs of support for parolees, but not for exonerees necessarily. And so there's a tremendous amount of aftercare that goes on with our clients when they come out of prison. You never know exactly what they will need, but we have to sort of stand at the ready to make sure that we can help to provide it. And so there are lots of opportunities for people from outside who want to do something good for our clients to help with the aftercare and the support and the sort of helping them to put their lives back together and launch the next part of their lives, the happy part of their lives. Not just money and not just things, but all kinds of different support. You just never know exactly what they're going to need, but almost all of them need quite a bit just to get themselves started. And so that's a great way for people to help us and our clients.
Well, Adam, my final question is specifically for you. Let's talk about that signature bow tie. What's the story behind that, and how long have you been rocking it?
Well, I don't even know how to answer that question exactly. I just, there's one really profound thing about bow ties, and that's it's so much easier to get through lunch without getting your lunch on your bow tie.
Good point.
Maybe I should switch to bow ties.
Takes a lot of money in the long run and makes you a little less dopey for the rest of the day. So that's the rest of it is rather confidential. I'm not sure I can really share.
Okay, fair enough. Well, Paul and Adam, I happen to know that you have a big hearing to get ready for tomorrow, so we don't want to hold you any longer, but I thought this was a great discussion. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope that you'll come back on Crime Redefined, and maybe we can get into some specific cases and issues as appropriate.
Yes, we'd love to come back anytime.
Fantastic.
Really appreciate it. Good luck tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. I really love the podcast, and you guys are great.
Oh, thank you so much, Paula.
All right.
Take care.
It was really a fascinating discussion, Mehul. I can see that from the outside looking in, that it really takes an army of resources to undo wrongful convictions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so good that LPI has some resources. They have all of the students to do a lot of the legwork that in the original investigation probably never was done.
That's right. And not only are they battling the legal and the scientific issues, but also issues of human nature. And I think this is a big part of where these wrongful convictions come from, and that's ego and not wanting to admit any wrongdoing.
Yeah, those issues are harder to deal with than the evidence in the case itself.
Yeah, I don't know if that's I don't know if that's just human nature. Like I said, I don't know if that's something that will ever change. Hopefully we can get to a spot where people can just say, hey, look, this is wrong, take it on the chin and then move on.
Yeah, I would say that, in my consulting work, if I have criticism of the prosecution crime lab, I hope that they take it as constructive criticism, and maybe we'll
versus
look at that
an
and
attack.
say, yeah, they may take it as
there's a
an
difference,
attack.
obviously, right?
Well, yeah, and they may take it as an attack initially, and that's fine. But I hope maybe they'll go back to the lab and say, oh, you know what? Yeah, I need to look at how I do that in the future.
Yeah, and then from there, that it kind of goes to my next point is that I was really impressed with both of them, with Paul and Adam, with their attitude and the acknowledgement that people sometimes make mistakes, and that it's about fixing the injustice rather than pointing fingers.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, there's politics here too. It takes a lot of people
Always.
to get somebody out of prison. It takes a judge, it takes a DA to cooperate on some level. So there has to be some diplomacy.
That's right. And I think at the bottom of everything, there's always going to be, either politics or money or both.
Yeah, and I think you have to handle it with care, because ultimately you do need the cooperation of the district attorney in some regard to, get these cases resolved and get these people free. And I've noticed that very often their clients have already done a lot of legwork on their own cases, and that gives LPI a really good head start. And I've had that same experience with some of the pro pers that I work with who are really mindful. I mean, after all, it's, they're the ones whose life is basically at stake here. And the more responsible pro pers I work with, they want to be the expert in their case. They want to know everything about it. And, unfortunately, in these wrongful conviction cases, at some point in the process, it falls on the shoulders of the wrongfully convicted individual to seek out, the last resort for their freedom, such as LPI. But you wonder how many of these men and women slip through the cracks, after being so demoralized by their case and the unsurmountable issues with the legal system.
Yeah, we definitely heard that a lot from Adam, and then Paul had mentioned some of the numbers of the volume of cases that they're going through. So you're right; it's really on the wrongfully convicted to push this and make sure that they get it in front of somebody.
Yeah, and not to give up if LPI doesn't get right back to them, because of course they're backlogged as well.
That's right. And something else that I, kind of took away from this is that this work isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
But it seems like the law school clinic provides students with an awesome launch pad to begin a really rewarding and intense career in criminal law. And it'd be interesting to see what they do next.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how you can't be inspired after going through their clinic. And, having had the pleasure of working with LPI on some cases, as the role in the role of a DNA consultant, I'm always really struck with how relentless both the attorneys and the students are, and the drive that they have. And, they essentially have to redo the entire investigation of the case, either because the prosecutor didn't really do their job initially, or maybe even scarier is that a defense attorney who may have been paid a lot of money during the trial didn't do their job as well. And by the way, this is several years later, which makes it much harder because now it's cold, as you mentioned. People's memories aren't as good. People may have died. Records may have been lost. Evidence may be gone. I mean, it's really, really a Herculean task. But what I've seen from LPI is they don't leave any stone unturned as they battle for justice. And I got to tell you, Dion, that, they've rubbed off on me that being, around their talented attorneys and motivated students has really helped me to up my game.
Yeah, I don't see how that could be really infectious and push you to, to do whatever you can and work harder at, like you said, work harder at your game, right?
Yeah. And then you really have to personalize it and think of that poor person who is innocent, who has been in jail for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and just know that, LPI may be their very last hope.
This has really been an interesting look at the issue of wrongful convictions from all sides on Crime Redefined. We talked about the common causes, spoke with exoneree Fernando Bermudez, and now we went behind the scenes, of a program that makes exonerations happen.
Well, listeners, we will post a link to a video that will show you and tell you more about LPI, and we'll put that right in the episode description. And I also wanted to point out the very good work that LPI does in advocating for reform of the criminal justice system. So also be sure to check out their Instagram account at Project for the Innocent, where you can learn more about their victories and their fundraising events if you want to get involved and help out.
We really want to, let people know we appreciate and say thank you to all of the wonderful guests we have the honor of talking to on Crime Redefined. A huge thanks to all of you out there that are also downloading our episodes and following us on social media. Don't hesitate, when we mean that, to weigh in and tell us what you think about Crime Redefined.
Yeah, the good and the bad. Should I have said that?
Yeah, be careful what you ask for.
Right.
And Halloween is around the corner.
This is true.
Be sure to please visit crimeredefined.com, where you can access all of our episodes and do some binge listening to this crazy year of 2020.
No doubt.
Thank you for listening to the Crime Redefined podcast. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Crime Redefined. Please send us your comments and questions and join us for the next episode.